Welcome one, welcome all to Unity Church-Unitarian. I'm the Reverend Kathleen Rollens, serving as the interim senior minister here at Unity and sharing today's service with the worship associate, Ari Giles, and our guest minister, the Reverend Keith Kron, who serves as transitions director at the Unitarian Universalist Association. I want to give a special shout out and welcome to those of you who are watching us online this morning. Although we here in the sanctuary can't see you, we know that you are very much a part of our worship life, and we send you our love and our prayers, and we hope to see you here in person sometime soon. Also, a special welcome to all of our visitors and guests this morning. If you're visiting us for the first time, or maybe this is your first couple of times, please do stop by our Finding Yourself at Unity class, which is held in between the services, 10:15, up in the Gannett room. We do hope that you find Unity Church to be a place where you can find and keep your balance, and a place which nourishes you and inspires you to lead a life of integrity, service, and joy. Your gifts and your wounds are welcome here. It is so good to be together with you in worship this morning. Come into this sacred space in mind, body, heart, and spirit.
To be human is to be religious. To be religious is to be mindful. To be mindful is to pay attention. To pay attention is to sanctify existence. May our time together be a time to honor and celebrate our humanity and to sanctify the existence of our lives and the life around us. As Sylvia comes forward, we are reminded that accepting each other means sharing the burden of an unpredictable element. Fire and fellowship keep us warm only when tended with care. Come, let us worship together. As you are able for the responsive reading. Much of ministry is a benediction, a speaking well of each other and the world. A speaking well of our value, honesty, love, forgiveness, trust. A speaking well of our efforts, a speaking well of our dreams. This is how we celebrate life, through speaking well of it, of living the benediction and the blessing, and becoming as the word of us spoken.
Each time we gather for worship, we set aside a moment to expand the caring ministry of this congregation. And together we recognize the cycle of life and death, the circle of love, compassion, and witness that is at the center of this and every sacred community. We stand at the side of parents and teachers and all those whose primary spiritual practice is caring for children, with those who live with grief or chronic pain, with illnesses seen and unseen, with mental disability or addiction. We support you. We pray for our neighbors in prison, those who care for family members in ill health, those who struggle with loneliness, and those who strive to stay afloat amidst poverty. Our lives are blessed by those who face their final days with honesty, and by those who rise above heartbreak to challenge oppression in all its forms. We pray for those in harm's way, for the wisdom and strength of the leaders of the world, and for the people of this courageous congregation, as together we live into our longing to embody and help build beloved community. We hold you. Will you pray with me now for all these we name? We send our condolences to Unity member Debbie Sheets on the death of her sweetheart, Dennis Carter, who died on Monday, October 23rd. Debbie and his daughter Elise were present with him in his dying process, and although we mourn his passing, we also celebrate his release from Alzheimer's and dementia. We continue to hold Maya and Brett Hendel in our caring embrace as Brett begins radiation treatment after 5 weeks of healing from his surgery for tongue cancer. We send our healing thoughts to Kathy Taylor, who is navigating challenges with a cracked sternum and compressed disc. And we're holding in care Phyllis Sherman, who fell and broke her arm earlier this week. We pray for a speedy recovery as she heals from this injury. I now invite you to speak aloud the names of those that you would like to hold in care in today's worship. Michael, Christine, Kelly, Dan. We hold now in care the places in our world that need our prayers. This is the 5th anniversary of the deadly attack on the Tree of Life Synagogue, and we hold our Jewish siblings in prayer as they continue to recover and heal from this act of anti-Semitism. This is the 22nd day of suffering for Palestinians and Israelis. And we pray for the peoples of both nations. We grieve for the families of lives lost and homes demolished or destroyed, for the national trauma inflicted upon all peoples involved in this terrible war. This is the 613th day of the war in Ukraine. And as Ukrainian people continue to fight for their homeland, may we be ever faithful and vigilant in supporting them. And this week, in Lewistown, Maine, 18 people lost their lives, more wounded, by a gunman who had access to an assault-style rifle. Lewistown marks the 37th mass killing in the United States this year. Shame on the feckless legislators who cannot bring themselves to enact sensible gun legislation. We grieve with and for the families and the people of Lewistown who must rebuild their community and their lives after this tragedy. So as we hold this heaviness, I invite you into a moment of prayer with me, knowing that prayer does not change things, but it changes people, and people have the power to change things. O Spirit of life, this world's complexity brings forth no clear answers, but instead yields question after question. In the midst of crisis, can we look for humanity? In the midst of pain, how can we provide comfort? In the midst of conflict, can we center reconciliation? In the midst of difference, can we practice love? In the midst of what's broken, let us promise compassion. In the midst of the other, may we see a reflection of the divine, of the world in which we wish to build, the world which we call beloved community. We pause now in silent witness to these aspirations. Amen, and may it be so.
My friend, Henry David Thoreau, is out there somewhere, hiding, I dare say. Mr. Thoreau is a bit shy, as I'm sure you probably know.
I'm coming, Miss Margaret Fuller. Coming, be right there. And I'm not shy. I just don't really like all these people.
Henry, people make you uncomfortable, but I believe you love humanity.
You're right, Margaret. Humanity is divine, but people, ugh.
It's good to see you again, Henry.
It's good to see you too, Margaret. You look different somehow.
Yes, well, another year and times do change. But here it is again, All Hallows Eve, Halloween, the time when the veil between the living and the spirits of the past becomes thinner and thinner, and we're allowed to see each other again.
Yes, and all these people, they can see us. I don't like it, especially with the way some of them have been talking about me lately.
Oh, what have they said about you?
Well, it seems that this generation doesn't think as highly of me as some in the past. They don't think as much of my work or the 2 years, 2 months, and 2 weeks I spent living alone in my tiny little cabin in the woods of Weldon Forest. Mm-hmm. It eats at me, it really does. And you have actually been enjoying much more notoriety and publicity, haven't you? You are lauded so much for your strong literary contributions to the voices of women. Wonderful on its own part, but so much more appreciated for the scarcity of strong women voices. You were also lauded for your support of the, how should we say, more passionate and emotional writings of the female authors.
Yes, well, I must confess it has taken far too long to be appreciated.
It has been too long. It has been too long. But you know, Margaret, not everyone appreciates you. There are those who say that you were a cigar-smoking attention hound, that you played up to a male audience, and that though you fought for women's rights and supported those, you actually did not care for the company of women.
Ha. Well, I welcome the controversy.
Well, I think it is awful. I feel like people gossiping and chewing at us. It's like they want to chew us up and spit us out. It is appalling.
Appalling, Henry? Appalling requires surprise. Everyone knows this is just how people are. Are we not all, each of us, like the beasts of your Walden forest, ready to bare our teeth and take a bite out of anything we don't understand? Why, even the children here, I bet you know what it's like to feel like a wild animal, ready to show your teeth and growl.
They do.
Say, children, would you like to come up and hear a story about our animal nature?
Wait, Margaret, no. Last year, these wild children practically ate my walking stick.
Nonsense. Children, come on up. Our guest, the Reverend Keith Kron here, has a story to tell you. It's actually about how we treat each other in new and unfamiliar places. Come and have a seat.
It's about a classroom.
Classroom, one of the wildest places of all. Come on.
And Pastor Kron, you are of the living? Is that true? Well, then do come forward and join us. I do promise that Margaret and I will not bite. These, I'm not so sure. Tell us your thrilling story.
Good morning. The story with my friend Penelope, this is her story. Thank you for that wonderful introduction to We Don't Eat Our Classmates. It's by Ryan Higgins. Penelope Rex was nervous. It's not every day a little T-Rex starts school. What are my classmates going to be like? Will they be nice? How many teeth will they have? This was very important to Penelope. Penelope's mom bought her a new backpack with ponies on it. Ponies were Penelope's favorite because ponies are delicious. Penelope's dad packed her a lunch of 300 tuna fish sandwiches and 1 box of apple juice. And finally, the big day came. And Penelope Rex was very surprised to find out that all of her classmates were children. So she ate them. Because children are delicious. Penelope Rex, said Mrs. Newdeman, we don't eat our classmates. Please, spit them out at once. So she did. But it was not the best way to start school. Still, she was determined to have a very good first day. She tried hard to make friends with everyone at recess, but standing at the bottom of the slide with her mouth open didn't help. She thought she finger-painted some of her best work, but her picture of the dinosaur eating the child didn't win her any friends either. She even saved Griffin Emery a seat next to her at lunch. You can sit here next to me, she said. He didn't. Penelope started to notice that everyone was making friends but her. And it was lonely. When she got home, her dad asked her about her first day of school. I didn't make any friends, Penelope cried. None of the children wanted to play with me. Penelope Rex, did you eat your classmates? Well, maybe, sort of, just a little bit, she said. Sometimes it's hard to make friends, said her dad, especially if you eat them. You see, Penelope, children are just the same as us on the inside, but they're a lot tastier. And that gave Penelope a lot to think about. The next day, Penelope tried really hard at school. But poor Penelope. She couldn't stop herself from eating her classmates. Mrs. Noodleman, Penelope ate William Amoto again. She spit him out, but they were still all afraid of her. Except for Walter. Walter was the goldfish. So Penelope tried to make friends with him. "Will you be my friend?" she asked. And she stuck her finger into the bowl to pet him, and Walter went chomp. "Ee," cried Penelope, "he's eating my finger." But once Penelope found out what it was like to be someone's snack, she lost her appetite for children. She stopped eating her classmates, even when Cece Woodman spilled barbecue sauce all over herself. And soon Penelope began to make friends. They played hide and seek, and she made brownies for them to eat. And now, even when children look especially delicious, Penelope peeks at Walter and remembers what it's like when someone tries to eat you. And Walter the goldfish stares right back, and he licks his lips. Because dinosaurs are delicious.
Well, wasn't that surprising? And you, Henry, what did you think of that?
Margaret, what on earth is a dinosaur?
Henry, really, have you learned nothing over the centuries? But truly, even in our time, the giant reptile bones of Lyme Regis, dug out of the hillside, fossils, by a woman, a little girl, actually. Though I don't blame you for not knowing, because she was never given the credit she was due in her lifetime. Familiar story. Really, is it so impossible to believe that a woman could possibly have anything of value to contribute to society? I am glad that Penelope Rex's classmates came around in the end, and that she was there to see it too.
I am too. Margaret, people don't like new things. They don't like change. But as I look at these children here, they look delicious. And I also believe that they will be different than people were in our day.
Will you? Will you be different? Would you welcome a dinosaur into your classroom?
No.
Even if she nibbled you a little bit? Yes. Yes, well, it may not be a dinosaur, right? But there are always new things, new ideas, new people to encounter, and some of them can be frightening and hungry.
Yes, and even I know that you can't always run away from things, right? You can't always go off in the forest and be by yourself. Sometimes you just have to stand up and say, "Don't eat me," and don't eat my walking stick.
All right, children, all right. Time to go off to class. And will the congregation please join in singing us on our way?
Yes, let's live deliberately and suck all the marrow out of those dinosaur bones.
Oh, Charlotte.
Well, that was fun, wasn't it? Wonderful, wonderful. October is our pledge month, and we are approaching the end of our pledge month. So a member, Marcia Hayes, would like to speak to you before we take this morning's offering.
Hi, I'm Marcia Hayes, and I'm a member here at Unity Church. I'm here to talk with you about why my family pledges. I'm going to start with a true story from what feels like a long time ago. In the early 1980s, I was that nerdy science kid. I loved to stargaze with my dad, and I wanted to be an astronaut, and I loved science class. And there's one lesson that I distinctly remember. My science book had a graph, and scientists had taken measurements of carbon dioxide from a Hawaiian observatory over decades. The graph was a curve, season by season, year after year, with this obvious trend of higher and higher concentrations of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The book explained that these increasing levels of carbon dioxide could lead to this greenhouse effect of warming the planet. Remember those days of global warming? And I was gobsmacked. I knew that India, where my mom's family lived, was hot. And what if it got hotter? And what about the polar bears? And I jumped one thought to the next, and I thought about what I now know as the interconnected web of all beings, and everyone was affected. And this would end the world as we knew it. And this was the biggest problem I could imagine. But then I relaxed, and it occurred to me, I won't need to worry about this. For 9-year-old me, reason that if this problem was well enough known to be literally in my textbook, that the adults of the world would recognize this as the all-encompassing problem that it was. They would solve this problem before I was a grown-up. And I wondered, what problems are going to be left for me to solve? I just couldn't imagine it. I will note that I am still learning about human nature and the complexities of the world. Switch gears. My family joined Unity as a place for a beloved community for us and our child. We wanted our son Ezra to grow up in a place that nurtures him, a place where he will learn to remain in community through accomplishment and conflict. Because what I have learned is that there is no they coming to save us. We need this beloved community to help do the work. It calls us to work with our differences. It is the commitment to stay together when we don't agree. And we need this commitment to remain around us when it really feels like the world is ending. So my family pledges to strengthen this community, to support the staff and the programs that make this beloved community possible, and to build its capacity to act beyond our walls, to act on my values. So though we can and we will receive pledges beyond October 31st, which is the official closing date of our pledge campaign, right now, our Unity leaders are preparing the budget right now. So your pledges are going to be making a difference between cutting back or moving forward. So please fill out your pledge card, giving as generously as you can, and commit to this beloved community. Thank you.
Your support of the church is an expression of the promises we make to each other and to the world. Just as you heard Marcia ask us to fulfill our promises to the church. Now we reflect on the promise we make to the wider community. Today, the larger portion of our offering will be shared with Good Courage Farm. Under the executive leadership of Kerri Meyer, Unity's former director of religious education. Good Courage is an agrarian ministry in west central Minnesota, where people of all faiths gather to learn and work together for the healing of creation. This collection will help support 2 young adults as they participate in a 6-week apprenticeship. And for a special treat, please visit the parish hall after the service for a taste of their raw apple cider. Will the ushers please come forward? Please give as generously as you can today. We dedicate these offerings and ourselves to the greater work of the church, which is weaving a tapestry of love that we call community.
It was nearly a perfect summer day for a walk. I was not alone. My favorite sighting on my street in Providence was a woman watching her adorable French bulldog down the street. I heard "Good boy, Luke" several times as she pulled slightly on the leash to keep him from being too distracted. I notice around the corner comes a man with a pit bull. And Luke immediately goes stock still. But the pit bull is wagging her tail with the greatest of hope and charm, clearly excited about the possibility of making a new friend. And she had won me over. The woman is trying to get Luke to move forward in vain because he is a statue. Eventually, the man with the pit bull reaches the woman and her dog, and if possible, Luke is even stiffer. The woman is trying to tell Luke it's okay, and the pit bull snips hopefully and inquisitively at her new wished-for friend. And then, in an instant, Luke relaxes and sniffs back. and quickly their tails are all a-wagging as they sniff and nuzzle and snort. And I notice that the owners have relaxed, that they too have unclenched, that they are talking amiably, though near as I can tell, their tails are not a-wagging with the same veracity as their pets. It's only then that I realized that I had been clenching, and I feel my own body relax. I left the happy foursome and headed off, thinking how much of a metaphor this was for today's times, how we all seem to be living lives of trepidation, and yet hope and kindness are out there if we look beyond stereotypes, if we look beyond a single story, if we present ourselves with kindness, if we just try. I think about the reputation that pit bulls have, and yet she was the kindest of all. Maybe in these trying and difficult times, we can be a little bit more like the pit bull, offering a little hope and kindness to all those new friends we might make. I've been thinking a lot about the future of religion, not only our religion, but all religion. Thinking about the conflict going on worldwide, thinking about how the pandemic has changed our lives, changes our future, how it changes the future of religion. Though I had been thinking along about this for at least 5 years. It is the anniversary of the shooting of the Tree of Life Synagogue 5 years ago, and it was just 2 months before that it was announced about the sex scandal in the Roman Catholic Church in the Diocese of Pittsburgh. Two very tragic things to happen so close together, and at the time I can remember wondering and still wonder, why would anyone trust religion at all? I think about the shootings a year later, the person going into the mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand. I think about the Canadian discovering of the indigenous people in the mass graves where Christians had slaughtered the indigenous folks. What future does religion have? What future can it have? And yet I remember the quote that Ari shared with us to begin with from Robert Fulghum, "To be human is to be religious." And that to be religious is to be mindful is to pay attention, and that to pay attention is to sanctify existence. What does it mean to be religious today? What does it mean to be a religion, to be a Unitarian Universalist? What does it mean to be a minister in these times? As we live through these times of immense change, because it's not just the pandemic and the violence of Lewiston, there's also the attempted coup of our government, the shootings in Buffalo, Pulse, Club Q, Parkland, Uvalde, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, so many more. The list just goes on. How does religion show up in these moments? How do we show up as religious people? And yet, this is not new. I started at the Unitarian Universalist Association in 1996. I was hired then to be the director of the Office of Bisexual, Gay, Lesbian, and Transgender Concerns. And within 2 years of my being hired, in October of 1998, 25 years ago, a young man named Matthew Shepard was tied to a fence and left to die. The religious communities in Wyoming reached out to their denominations, asking, would someone show up and condemn the violence? Only 2 religious denominations showed up. The Metropolitan Community Church, and I represented our Unitarian Universalist Association. The minister at our congregation in Laramie had asked me to come to be with the congregation that Sunday, to say a few words, and we would lay some flowers by the fence where Matthew had died. I showed up. I participated in an interfaith service where we thought Fred Phelps was going to show up and protest. And then the next day was gathered with our congregation in Laramie. The minister, a brand new minister, read a letter that someone had sent supporting the congregation, and then introduced me by saying, and now here's the Reverend Keith Kron, who will deliver the sermon this morning for the congregation. I don't remember what I said. I had only prepared a few words. I will never forget what it was like to be there with those people that weekend. Later that weekend, 30 of us or so rode out to the fence where Matthew Shepard had died. The minister laid some flowers by the fence, turned to me and those gathered and said, and now Reverend Kron will deliver the memorial service for Matthew Shepard. I don't remember anything I said. I never forget the fence and that there were 30 Unitarian Universalists showing up, witnessing love over violence. It was later that church year when I was showing up as the guest speaker, the guest minister at our congregation in Littleton, Colorado. Columbine UU congregation, arriving there just 3 weeks after the shooting at the high school. I walked into the sanctuary and witnessed the strength of our faith, what we can do, because on the wall of that sanctuary, children from religious education classes all over the continent had written letters and sent in pictures offering love and support to the people of Littleton, Colorado, in the face of this violence, letting them know that they were not alone in this, that they were being held. And I also remember one of the most remarkable responses I ever saw to trauma came from the high school principal of Columbine, who, as people were trying to figure out how to move forward, literally said yes to every request that came in. And said, you want to plant some flowers? Do that. You want to have an assembly? Let's do that. You want to gather people together? Let's do that. Because there is not one way that we will move forward. We'll all move forward in our own way, and let's just witness and listen to each other as we do it. A reminder that faith, so much of it is built in little moments, little ways of showing up, little ways of sanctifying existence. It makes me think of Brené Brown, who talks about how trust, and that trust is built in little moments. And it makes me think that trust is also broken in little moments. And it reminds me of a class on death and dying I had in seminary. The teacher of the class was a woman named Anna. She was a Holocaust survivor. She was a graduate of Star King School for the Ministry, and she was a chaplain who worked with young people who were considering suicide. In the class on death and dying, she asked us one time to imagine what it would be like to be a chaplain at the bedside of a patient who was dying and who had almost no control over their body and could barely speak. Would one of us volunteer to be the chaplain, and would one of us volunteer to be the patient? 25 students volunteered to be the patient. No one volunteered to be the chaplain. Finally, one classmate raised his hand and said he would do it. So as the patient lay on the bed, the chaplain walked over to the patient, sat down next to the patient, and took the patient's hand. At that point, Anna stood up and said, "Please, never do that again." And 25 students all turned and looked at Anna. And it was clear to me she had been hoping for this moment. Because she said, "I want you to think about this patient. This is someone who has literally no control over their life. They can barely speak. And you took away more control from them by taking their hand without asking if you could do that first. What would have happened if you had given them the power to say yes or no to the question of, may I take your hand? Would you like me to hold your hand? I remember that story each and every day that I am in the ministry. What are the little moments that give people the power to be who they are, that give them the power to be human and to be religious? When we train new ministers, I ask ministers to think, what does a congregation need from its minister? You get the responses you would expect. They need good preaching. They need pastoral care. They need someone to work with the board. They need someone who will show up at the various events of the congregation, who will work with the staff, make a difference in the world. But it occurs to me now that I have been in this position for 13 and a half years, I've never heard someone say, my role as a minister is to build trust. My role as a minister is to do no harm. But then it occurred to me in 13 and a half years, I've never had a search committee said, what we want from a minister is to build trust and do no harm. Perhaps it's implied, maybe it's time we speak it aloud and talk about how important it is. During the pandemic, I had a dream. In the dream, I realized I am on the cliff of a mountain, hanging on for dear life. I can't figure out how to get up or down. I look to the side and I see another person off to my side, also hanging on. And they look over at me and go, "Would you tie my shoe?" I look over to the other side of me and I see a minister who, in the dream I know, who said, "Can you find me a congregation where the people are going to like me and treat me well and let me do the ministry I want?" And as I look around, I see thousands and thousands of people desperately trying to hang on, all trying to figure how to get up, how to get something that they need. And then the mountain begins to erupt. And I wake up. And I think how much this has been what we've gone through during the pandemic. We have been hanging on, all while trying to believe that everyone else around us is doing okay. And yet the world is erupting. This came as we were going through what was called the Great Resignation in UU ministry. Ministers would call me up and saying, "I'm going into farming. I'm leaving ministry. I want to go work with animals. I'm tired of what I've been doing." And when they would tell me why, they would talk about all the different things they had been asked to do during the pandemic that no one noticed and that they hadn't been compensated for. Our ministers who had become tech experts dealing with generational differences, congregations with fewer volunteers being asked to do more, with greater expectations and less recognition or pay. And I think about all those things, and it's not why any of us went into the ministry. But as I began to talk with colleagues from other denominations, I discovered we were actually doing better than most every other denomination I talked to. That this was not just about Unitarian Universalism, this was about religion. And as I began to pay attention, it was not just about religion. It was about anyone who is any kind of helping profession. Teachers, nurses, doctors, service workers, all expected to hold and absorb society's frustration when everyone was more frustrated, including those who were serving. The great example for me of that was Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, who managed gun control after the mass shooting in New Zealand, who managed to take her country through COVID with almost no cases, who after 5 years stepped down because of burnout and exhaustion. How have we been together? What do we need to be together? What does this mean for the future and the future of our faith, our religion? Religion is at its best when we show up, when we pay attention, when we listen to each other, when we sanctify existence. We are at our worst when it is about harm and violence, often which happen in our little moments. This is a moment when people will be looking to religion for connection, joy, making a difference. In fact, I believe this could be a golden moment for Unitarian Universalism. People will be looking for a multi-theological faith, for a place that welcomes all people because of their identities, where people can show up and make a difference. And it reminds me of a story that a friend of mine at the UUA told me about his son. His son lived on the west side of Cleveland, and he was going to visit his son. And he went and visited, and he took his son, who was in his 20s, and two of his 20-year-old friends to a Cleveland baseball game. And they drove by our congregation on the west side of Cleveland. And they saw on the side of the building a huge Black Lives Matter sign, a huge rainbow flag, a huge sign that said, "We welcome all people." And immediately the three 20-year-olds began talking to each other. That's where I'd want to go if I were to go to church. This sounds like a place that would match what I believe. And I was thinking about that as my friend was telling me this. What would happen if they showed up? Yes, they would be welcomed into their congregation. And we would be glad to have you as young people in our congregation. But how soon would they expected to act like the 60, 70, and 80-year-olds who are already in the congregation? To give like the 60, 70, and 80-year-olds who are in the congregation? To serve on 37 different committees like the 60, 70, and 80-year-olds who are in the congregation? Could we let them show up as who they are? We often do the same for our Black, Indigenous, people of color guests. I can tell you any number of churches where within 2 weeks, a person of color was asked if they would like to serve on the church board. So hungry for our, we make assumptions, and sometimes we don't pay attention. I never forget the story that an African-American colleague of mine told me once about visiting a UU congregation one morning to be a guest preacher. He showed up in his suit and a tie, carrying his sermon, and the greeter looked at him and asked if he was there to clean the building. I've been in over 500 UU congregations. I have never been asked when I showed up if I was there to clean. How will we pay attention to those who show up in our congregations? A colleague of mine was telling me a story about talking with a Mormon who was familiar with Unitarian Universalist. And when he learned that she was a Unitarian Universalist minister, he said, "You know, I am grateful that you all are not as dangerous as you could be." And she asked him, "What did you mean by that?" He said, "Your faith does a better job of welcoming all people. And yet it goes away when you let all behaviors happen in a congregation, which turns away some of the people you've welcomed. If you all could welcome all people but not all behaviors, you all would be dangerous." I would love for our faith to be more dangerous. Or will we expect everyone to show up and act like the people who are already there? Will we eat our classmates? Will we unclench? Can we build trust? Can we be a place where harm doesn't happen? This is a time to connect, to listen, to ask questions, to explore, for us to be classmates together. To say this is what it means to be human and to be religious. Even if we disagree, I'm reminded of a story that the dean of my seminary once told me about being at the Graduate Theological Union in a meeting of the other deans, and he and the dean of the American Baptist School were in this meeting, and they disagreed with each other. And he said what intrigued him about this particular meeting was that not that he and Jeff disagreed, but that the other 7 deans of the other 7 schools were trying to just simply make it better. And he finally said, "I want to know what you all think about this. Jeff and I disagree, but we're going to lunch afterwards. I want to know what you all believe so that we can make a decision and move forward. It may not be what I want, it may not be what Jeff wants, but we will all be heard, we will be listened to." Think about that. And I also think about this story. Our teachers can be whoever we think they should be, and even those who we wouldn't think they are. This is a final story, and then I'll close. This is a story from about 20 plus years ago. I had been asked to represent the UUA at a conference on religion, gender, and sexuality. There were 40 denominations invited to Nashville, Tennessee to talk about this. Huge, long dais of folks, and on the opening day, I found myself seated next to John from the Church of God and Mark from the Church of Christ. We're passing the microphone along. John gets the microphone and he goes, "Hi, my name is John. I'm from the Church of Christ, and we're to the right of the right." He smiles and he passes the microphone to me, and I go, "Hi, my name is the Reverend Keith Kron. I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister. I direct our Office of Bisexual, Gay, Lesbian, and Transgender Concerns," at which point I had to stop talking because John and Mark are literally scooting their chairs away from me. And I said, "And we are to the left of the left." I then had to pitch the microphone to Mark because he wouldn't take it from me. We spent 4 days talking about religion, gender, and sexuality. I watched jaws dropped as I talked about how even back in 1998, we had more women in ministry than men. About how we welcomed and ordained openly gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender people into our movement. And that we believed in comprehensive, lifelong sexuality education for our children, young people, and adults. On the last day of the conference, Mark and John and two of their friends, probably named Matthew and Luke, I cannot remember. They came up to me and said, "We would like to have lunch with you." And I thought, well, this will be fun. But they were all from Tennessee, and they knew I was originally from Tennessee, so we at least had that in common. And I said, sure. So we started talking about Tennessee at first. And then we got to what they wanted to talk about, and Mark said to me, "We wanted you to know that we have listened to what you have said this week. And we wanted you to know that we have listened to every single word, and we have disagreed with every single word that has come out of your mouth. But we also wanted you to know that we respect you. Because at least you are clear about what you believe, and we know you believe it. And while we can't agree with what you believe, we can honor your commitment to your faith." And in that moment, they were my teachers. That we can all be classmates together, that we can all learn from each other, even when we completely disagree with one another. And then I got to be their teacher when one of them tentatively asked me if I might know anything about football. And they were surprised to discover that I knew more about football than all four of them, and that I had worked my way through college officiating football, basketball, and softball. And in that moment, I became more than a single story to them, and a chance to see each other's full humanity. Think about that story in these times. This, I think, is our moment. Can we see each other's full humanity? Can we see each other as more than a single story? Can we show up with different opinions and listen to each other? Be classmates together. Be human together and sanctify each other's existence. That is my great hope for the future of religion, of our religion. It has been a delight to be here with you this weekend. As you work toward the call of your next minister, know you have my full support. We need your presence here in the world. Please be that presence we need. Amen.
Reverend Keith, I wanted to jump up and go, yes! So thank you for that powerful message, powerful and important message. And also thank you for being here yesterday for our Q&A about the ministerial search process. It was a really wonderful, wonderful weekend. So we hope you found inspiration in today's service, and now are inspired to take that out into your own life in service of this church and in service of the world. All of those opportunities, or many of them, can be found in your This Week at Unity and the insert. I just have one late-breaking announcement to make, and that's on Wednesday, November 1st, from 5:15 to 5:45 in the center room. I'll be hosting a brief vigil in solidarity with the suffering of both the Israeli and Palestinian people. This is not a political gathering, of course, but it's a pastoral response to the grief that we feel as this war continues. Our closing hymn speaks directly to the hope and the prayer that we have for peace. Let's rise, embody our spirit, and sing, "This is my song."
From A.A. Milne and the House at Pooh Corner. Piglet sidled up to Pooh and took Pooh by the paw. Yes, Piglet? Pooh asked. Nothing, said Piglet. I just wanted to be sure of you. May we go forth, working to be sure of one another. Go in peace, go in love, work for justice, go forth and bless the world.